Welcome, everyone. Great to see you. I am here today with Anthony Salvalaggio and Brigid Cami, editors of Toronto Journal. I love featuring these international editors, so welcome. Great to see you. How are you?
We're good,
Yeah, we're doing
thanks.
great, thanks, and thanks for having
Thanks
us
for
back.
having us. Yeah.
Of course, my pleasure. And as always, any questions any of you have, just go ahead and type them into the chat and I will work them into the conversation. So why don't you, either Bridget or Anthony, just tell us about the history of the magazine, when it started, and what compelled you to start a literary magazine?
Sure.
Go.
So we started it in the fall of 2022. There was a few reasons we started it. First, we felt like the city didn't have a literary journal with its name stamped on it, so we wanted something for the city. Uh, and and the sorts of things we publish are a combination of fiction and nonfiction. So each issue we opened with a piece about some sort of forgotten Toronto history or Canada
Mm.
history, where it's like a thoroughly researched piece about something that's forgotten. Then we have a piece about life in the city. That's the nonfiction part of the journal, and the rest, the vast majority, is short stories from around the world.
Mm.
Anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to add as well that so for the journal itself, every issue is published in print format, but also in audio format. Ideally, we like to have our authors read their stories, but we also do some of the audio as well, so that it's kind of available. All stories are available in both of those formats.
Oh, great. Okay. So there was really nothing? There was no, were there other literary magazines in Toronto, or was there just a total lack of
No, no, there are actually plenty of literary magazines in Toronto. We wanted to do something that kind of leaned specifically into the Toronto angle a little bit. And
Mm.
I guess really what it was kind of combining two of our kind of personal interests, which were like, we're kind of really interested in local history and like kind of
Mm.
like forgotten history, but we also both love reading. So we just kind of wanted to come up with a journal that kind of shoehorned in all of those things and kind of
Mm.
like made that part of its identity. So that's the idea. It's not to say that there aren't plenty of other literary magazines and
Mm.
journals in
Sure.
Canada and Toronto, but we wanted to kind of put our own spin on it.
Makes sense. Can you give us an example? I know nothing about Toronto history, let alone forgotten Toronto history. Can you give us an example of a few like forgotten stories that you've gotten to publish?
Sure.
Sure. So
Yeah.
one of the ones we did was we went to an old, we went to the library was having a sale for old books, and we found a book by this author called Maison de la Roche, and we had never heard of her. So we Googled her, and that became one of the history pieces. And it turned out that she was a Canadian author who had also lived abroad. But at the time, in the 20s, I think was it?
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
20s, she was one of the most popular authors in the world. Like there were
Oh,
all these
wow.
quotes from, yeah,
Yeah.
there were all these quotes from newspapers that said, like in England, the only more popular author was Dickens. Like that was the only other author
What?
that sold more.
Yeah.
So, and she's been completely forgotten. Like at some point in the 60s, people started to say like, oh, she's not a real author. Like it's more like soap opera stuff that she's writing. It's fun writing. It's not real literature. And and then she was just like forgotten. Nobody knows anything, had heard of her. We had never heard of her.
Yeah, well, certainly not. Like, there were a couple of people I think who were like quite a bit older who had messaged us saying that they had heard of her
That's true,
like
yeah.
decades ago, but that like anyone who was like our age or even like roughly around our age, like
Right.
had no clue who she was. So it was kind of surprising to see how somebody who 100 years ago was one of the most famous authors in the world is a local author, and now like we have no clue about her. And we read a decent amount, so we were kind of surprised to say,
Yeah.
"Wow,
That's
how did we never come
amazing.
across her?" Yeah. So
Do you know
yeah.
what happened? Like what turned against her?
So there was a few things. She lived with another woman and
Mm.
they had adopted children. So
Mm.
one of the theories was that people started to think like, oh, maybe she's a lesbian. And at the time that was like a creepy thing.
Mhm.
So people started to think she was creepy. Um, and for whatever reason, they started to think of the literature more as like a soap opera.
There does also tend to be a thing which is a common, I mean, historically, which has been a common thing with a lot of like Canadian writers and like local writers here, which is that there's a tendency for the local, historically, I'm not saying it's the case now, but like 100 years ago, where the local establishment would not necessarily take you very seriously as a Canadian writer. So if they had a reason to kind of say, oh, she wasn't that good anyway, or whatever, like there
Mhm.
was kind of a tendency to not really support local writers. And I think maybe that tendency kind of, she was popular during her time, but as soon as her time had kind of passed, or she was after she had passed away, it was a little bit like, she was never really that good anyway. And
Mm.
I think that just kind of the critics kind of did their work, and that seems to be what happened based on,
Wow. That's so
yeah.
interesting. I feel like usually it's the opposite, where cities or, like small towns will celebrate their one. This is the artist that came from our town, and they really promote that.
No, no, it's interesting. There's one of a Canadian writer who we both really like, Robertson Davies.
Sure.
This is one of the things he complains about a lot in a lot of his writing, is just saying like Canada is always like, and again, this is at Davies's time, but like Canada's always looking over its shoulder to see like what are the states going to say about this? What is the UK going to say about this before they actually want to say, oh yeah, we also give it the stamp of our approval,
Yeah.
right? And I think, again, I'm not saying it's a current problem, but I think historically it seems like it was a problem that Canadian writers and artists kind of recognized.
Hmm.
It's like looking for this external validation for whatever reason, and
Mhm.
only treating that as kind of the treating that as the thing that matters more than kind of
Right.
trusting your own instincts about what's good. I don't know.
That is fascinating. So, can you characterize the Toronto literary culture now? I'm sure it's hard. It's a hard question because I'm sure there are different pockets and different, depending how old you are and where you kind of fall culturally, there are different groups. But would you say there's like a lively literary scene, a lively lit mag scene? Or do you feel like you're kind of yet to tap into something like that?
Do
Yeah.
you want
No,
to?
there are a lot of
Yeah.
literary magazines. For example, we went to like the biggest book and magazine fair in Canada last month.
Yeah, last
Yeah.
month it's held in Toronto every year, so.
And you get to see all the literary magazines there. There's a lot of new ones cropping up actually right now.
Mhm.
Um, it's a surprisingly small pool. Like we
Yeah.
tend to run to the same people
Yeah.
at all the events. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's small pool, and I would say very DIY. Like, we
Mm.
meet a lot of different people who run their own journals, and they all have their own ways of doing it. And they are sort of exactly like you said, independent pockets. So like we all kind of like interact with each other and say like, oh, that's a cool journal. Oh, you have a cool journal. But it's kind of like very like, I think it's a little bit not necessarily like a unified scene. It's more like,
Yeah.
individual people with their individual journals.
Hmm. What
Yeah.
is government funding like? Here it's gotten pretty depressing. I think people always look to Europe and Canada as these like beacons of government support for the arts.
So unfortunately, it's pretty depressing here as well.
Yeah.
We've actually, so I think you can apply to funding after you've been in operation for 2 years. We've been in operation for about 3 years now.
Mhm.
So we've been applying, but we haven't gotten anything yet.
Uh,
So yeah.
So, yeah, there is support available, but like we've even been told by some of the people who like run these organizations, that it's just the funding is not what it used to be.
mhm.
And as much as we like lots of projects, it's just that there isn't kind of the support to go around that there once was. But it is what it is. It's not like, hopefully it's something that'll bounce back, and like there definitely is some support available. It's just like you do got to be ready to kind of like be a little bit DIY about it,
Yeah,
certainly
sure.
when you're starting out. Yeah.
Yeah. So, going back to the magazine, why did you choose a print format? And also, do you have subscriptions? Do you sell the magazine locally, abroad?
So to answer the latter part first, we do sell it. We sell subscriptions online. And it can be purchased from anywhere in the world online. It's also distributed Canada-wide across maybe 100 bookstores
Mhm.
as of our most current issue. And the reason we went for print is just that there's something more permanent about print.
Mhm.
Like if you get something published and it's online, almost inevitably that website will eventually disappear. But with print, like you have something physical that you'll always have. Yeah.
Yeah, we just like holding the journal in our hands ourselves, so we figured other people might
Yeah.
like to do that too.
Yeah.
And what's interesting too is that we have found that there's like in the last few years there's like a bigger push toward print. Certainly in Toronto,
Yeah.
there's a really great magazine shop called like Issues Magazine Shop that basically every quarter, is it every quarter or every 6 months maybe, like hosts a whole new like set of like interesting print journals from Canada and Toronto, but like around the world as well. And so like clearly there's tons of stuff like new journals that are coming out in print with all sorts of like interesting formats and stuff. And like when we went to this shop, we kind of saw, wow, like there are a lot of people who are interested in print. It's not
Yeah.
just us. So like,
There
you
does
know,
seem to be a renewed interest in print,
Mm.
especially as a way to get away from the scrolling,
yeah.
the
Hmm.
desk scrolling. Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I know we have a lot of, I think most of our listeners are in the US. So just to confirm, you accept stories from all over the world and they don't need to be Canada or Toronto themed.
Yes, exactly. So again, our history piece tends to be the nonfiction pieces tend to be Toronto or Canada themed, but the fiction is absolutely it's totally free and open to everyone in the world.
Okay, great. So how would you describe the kind of work that you're looking for in the fiction?
I mean, I guess like if we had to group it, it might be literary fiction, but really it's just anything that's good. Like
Yeah. Anything
we've
that's good.
published
Yeah.
science fiction before. There was one piece that was really compelling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really just like if the story really hooks us, that
Hmm.
seems to be the only criteria, which granted is maybe a little bit subjective. Like it comes down to
Very
our own taste.
subjective.
It comes down to our own taste a little bit, but I mean, I would imagine that with most literary magazines, you know, there's always going to be an element of the taste of the writers when you have so many great stories that you're getting. But really, like if the story hooks us, then
Hmm.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's the main criteria
So
for
I
me.
guess with that in mind, can you tell us a bit more about your own literary taste? So if there, I think we have all writers here who are thinking, how could I break into this magazine? To them, they have a good story, but to you, it might not be a good story. So what, can you tell us like what kind of work you gravitate toward, what kind of published writing you like? Let's unpack that idea of good a little bit.
Well,
Sure.
I mean, it's a little bit odd because if we start to look through the stories we publish, we're like, wow, these stories don't really have that much in common with each other. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, we have a tendency to like, I mean, um, honestly, I don't know. Like, because yeah, we've published like genre fiction, science fiction, things that tend a little bit more towards being surreal, but then also things that are very much just like kind of more straight, like realism type pieces. I don't know. What would you say to that?
Yeah. I mean, we try to read everything, so it's not like
Yeah, yeah,
we're
we're
looking
pretty.
for something that's like something else. There's a lot of stuff we've published where I've never read anything like that before.
Mm.
So we're pretty open.
Yeah, so it might not be super helpful to anyone who's listening and trying to like figure out what is our angle, but basically we're pretty omnivorous readers, and like you know if you can kind of get us hooked, then you know then chances are we're going to want to publish the piece. But it's I don't know.
Yeah,
It's hard to
yeah.
say. It's hard to say from one piece to the next what's really going to like grab us. Yeah,
Right. We
yeah.
have a question here. This might help concretize it a little bit. Wonder which stories are favorites. Mary, do you mean in the magazine that they've published or just great short stories generally?
What have you published that really sticks in your mind that you really love?
Oh, sure. Why don't we each pick?
Uh,
What you want to? We can each pick a couple there.
okay. Yeah. Okay, I have to think about it. I'm so attached.
Yeah. This is all the question about attachment and stuff. But no, there's some great stories. I mean, I can just name the names, of the stories, and the authors. But like, there was a great story called Tiger Teeth in our last issue by a writer from Southern Ontario named Jonathan Scott Davies. There's a story we really love in our fifth issue. It was called Zeus is Getting Made by Michael Casteris. He's also a local writer. Those like again those really stand out for me,
Yeah.
like significantly
I
off the
think
top of my head.
I think one of the first stories in issue two that really that I was like, oh, we're really getting into top tier stuff here was there was a story called Meet Me in Kathmandu by Marcy Roman,
Roman. Yeah.
who's an American author, and it was just a story about this woman who is in the early stages of her marriage, and they've just had a kid, and she's just sort of questioning everything and contemplating an affair. And it was just so well done. And it was one of those stories that had a perfect ending, where the story was perfect and then the ending was even more perfect.
Hmm. So that's interesting because the way you describe that story, it could be like not interesting at all.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like it's very internal, right? And it's like
Yeah.
she's it's a story of saying she's sort of dissatisfied, she's in a marriage and she's thinking about stuff. So what can we tease out like what in that story made it special for you?
It was a combination of the story itself. So she sort of starts to take some steps towards potential infidelity.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the story itself, which is interesting, and also there was at the same time the introspective stuff where
Mm,
she's thinking about like it's almost like what she's planning goes far beyond what actually happens, and then you kind of see like what happens versus what she was expecting to happen.
mm,
Um, it's like it sounds simple, but
mm-hmm,
it's so gripping.
mm-hmm,
I think you kind of hit on it there too. I think the thing with a lot of these stories that's interesting is that like a gloss doesn't really do them much justice because a lot of the time like you're talking about something that like on paper I've heard this 1,000 times, but what usually makes the story interesting is the way that it's like I have heard this 1,000 times and yet I feel like I'm hearing it for the first time.
yeah.
It's an angle that I've never seen before, and in a way that's almost more surprising than a story that's really completely just shocking out the gate, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm,
like something where it's like I expected this to be, I come to this idea with my own preconceived notions, and somehow you've managed to upset them or
mm-hmm,
augment them or improve them in a way that I never would have imagined, which is kind of like always a kind of a pleasure to read in any story.
Mhm.
yeah, that makes sense. So are you drawn, would you say like to strong characters or to the style of the prose or the like a strong story, a plot, or kind of all of the above, depends on the story.
Yeah, I think a combination of those will either make a strong story or not. Um, so I guess it's how all those play together and whether a strong story comes out of it.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, I don't think it necessarily is like we've definitely published some stories that are just pure like exciting like plot driven stories and others that are more introspective. And I mean, I think um like I don't know, I think it's almost like we find that like within each issue it's kind of like the stories one type of story tends to balance out the other and you kind of want both because like you do want kind of a plot that really hooks you in, but sometimes you want to see um, maybe something a little bit slower, but with a little bit deeper character development. I
Mm,
don't know. Like
Yeah,
we're like, again,
like
it's
yeah,
yeah.
no,
Go
we
ahead.
have a couple of stories that are just pure comedy, but
mm,
like
Yeah,
they're
like
so funny and there's no introspection at all, but they're so funny that it's enough to be a really good
yeah,
story.
yeah. It's just a wild story, and like
Yeah.
you sometimes you want to read a wild story. Sometimes you want to like dig down deep into the character. And I mean, I think the idea is there's room for both of those things, and like literature is better for having both of those things. So
mhm.
want to kind of
Yeah.
represent both aspects, I think.
Mm.
Mhm.
How many stories do you publish per issue?
It depends on how many we get overly attached to. So I think we on the lower end we've had like six, and on the upper end we've had maybe 12 or 13.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. The most agonizing part of this whole process, working on it, is when we finally decide what we have to pick and what we have to like
Yeah.
pass on. It's like
It's
Yeah.
just
depressing
we're just
time.
like
Yeah.
lying on the floor, like groaning and saying like, how do we do this? How do we do this? And it's horrible. But like, at a certain point, you're like, we only have this much space. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And is it a consideration too, like, well, we published something similar to this in the last issue, or, we already have a really funny story. I don't think we should publish two funny stories in this issue, or do you just take it story by story?
So,
No, within an issue, we do occasionally think about that. Like I remember this time we had two stories that were sort of similar. Remember the ones about
yeah, yeah, yeah.
um yeah, so if it seems like it's sort of the same territory and a similar story, then we pick the best one.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, but I mean, even that being said, like a lot of it does come down to just like, what can I not bear to part with more? Like what is going to like not keep me,
Mhm.
what's going to keep me up at night more if I pass on it, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like it really comes down to that at the end. So it's like,
That said, there are still some stories I think about from like 3 issues back
yeah,
that
it's like
I'm like, we should have accepted that
yeah,
one.
it's
Yeah.
painful. It's
Yeah.
painful. You got to put it out of your mind when the issue's out though.
Yeah.
So
It's so interesting to hear the editor's perspective because you don't think about editors having like rejection regret.
oh yeah,
So
Oh,
no,
there's a
do
lot of
you ever
that.
think about reaching out to those writers and ask if the story's still available?
Yes.
yeah.
Actually, all the time we think
Like
about that.
yeah, the thing is, even like as editors, I mean, I think fundamentally what we are is just really enthusiastic readers, which I mean, I think is what all editors fundamentally should be. But I mean, like we don't we think of ourselves more as like readers who are just like amazed, like, wow, I can't believe this author gave us this amazing submitted this amazing story to us, right?
Yeah.
And it's like kind of it's we approach it from that
Mhm.
place. And so it's like it's hard to be very calculating with this stuff because it gets incredibly emotional when it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you have to, part with it. But I think it's just because fundamentally we're just like readers who love reading. So
Huh?
that's what it
That's
comes down.
great. And a question here, are the two of you the only readers? And how does the editorial process work?
So yes, we are the only readers. It's gone beyond the point of being overwhelming. So for the next issue, we're gonna try to. People have reached out saying they want to be involved in the reading, so we're gonna try to
Mhm.
set up a program. Basically, how it works is we split the submissions in half. We have like a schedule of we have to read this many stories on weekdays, this many stories on weekends,
Yeah.
Mhm.
days. And so we each read half, then we pick our top 15 or 20
Hmm.
each,
Hmm.
read each other's, and then from that final batch, we pick the ones to
Then
publish.
then we spend 2 days arguing, trying to say it
Yeah,
should be this one, no, it should be this one,
yeah,
like whatever, and
Mhm.
then that's how we end up with the final
yeah,
product. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Mhm. And how many submissions do you get per, actually, what is your reading period? When are you open for submissions and how many submissions do you get during that time?
We're open for submissions year round, and we get so we publish 2 issues a year, and we get about 1,000 per issue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's, okay.
Yeah.
yeah,
So it's a
That's
lot of
it.
reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
But you're still enthusiastic about it. It's so refreshing and it's so nice to see because I think a lot of editors get at least there's a sense on our end as writers that editors are sort of jaded. You don't really always know if they're reading the work. They're just they've seen a lot of similar stories several hundred, several thousand times and it doesn't always it seems like that excitement is there for the really strong work, but there's a kind of at times like a jadedness that settles in, which is natural if you're reading like thousands and thousands of submissions.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it can get admittedly, it can get pretty exhausting toward the end of the reading period, but like the way we see it, like we would be reading anyway, and it's kind of interesting to see like, just the variety of submissions that you get is really like quite astonishing. Like
Yeah.
so it's it certainly keeps things interesting.
And the amount of stuff that's like just completely original, like
Mm.
stuff we've never read before. We've never read
It,
anything like that before. It's
yeah.
really like
S-
awe
Yeah,
awe
awe-inspiring. Yeah,
awe-inspiring.
it's
Yeah.
very surprising actually, because
Yeah.
like I think we didn't know at first. We started like with maybe getting like 6 submissions for our first issue, and then it was 200 for the second, 400 for the third, and it kind of grew.
Wow.
Mhm.
So, which was just surprising to us, right? We thought at first no one's ever going to hear of this journal or submit anything to it, like,
Yeah.
right? And then when we started to get submissions, that was shocking. And then the fact that they were actually also really good was just
Mm.
an additional shock.
Hmm.
Um, so
And
yeah.
are your submissions coming from all over the world at this point?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say m most of them are probably from this Canada and the States. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Like
it's open to submissions everywhere in the world, but probably 80% or more
uh,
from Canada and the US.
based on what we publish, like majority of our pieces are Canada and US.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
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 How are you getting the word out about the magazine? How are those submissions, like where are people hearing about it?
So after maybe the second issue, it seemed like it got on these websites that list literary magazines like Chill
Mhm.
Subs and
Mhm.
Authors Publish and a few of those.
Mhm.
And once it got on those, it was just immediately like,
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
yeah.
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 So can you tell us about the sound component? Because I think it says on your website that's what distinguishes this magazine. So how does that work? You have writers reading their work?
Yeah, so I would say, and again, when we say distinguish it, like we think it does, although like we're aware that like, there, you know, audiobooks and like having authors read their work is not like a new idea. But yeah, the sense is yes, ideally we have authors reading their work.
Mhm.
Again, well, part of the reason is just because I feel like you always when you're reading your own words, you just know how to say them so well, I feel like with a lot of the authors. So like we obviously like will read the stories as well, but ideally like to hear the author telling their story in their own words, just I think it gives you a connection to the story that you wouldn't otherwise have. Um, and I mean, I'm going to be guilty a little bit of paraphrasing what's already said on the website here, but I think like fundamentally for a lot of us who love stories, it's like you first learn to love them before you could ever read, and someone was telling them to you. So there's like something very that ancient, I guess you could say, that goes back very far, like having somebody tell you a story in their own words and listening to them tell you their story in their words. So it's like we want it to be, you know, part of that tradition. So that's where the audio component really that's why the emphasis is there for us.
How do you handle a writer who maybe doesn't read their work very well?
So I think we haven't yet hit a very, very bad case, but we've definitely had cases. So we send the author's guidelines to say, for example, if you stumble on a sentence, just pause and read it again, so that when we're editing it,
Hmm.
it's easy to cut. And there's been a few authors who completely just disregarded this, stumbled through every
Hmm.
sentence. Um, and so far, we've just been able to clean it as much as possible, and it's still
Mhm.
very much nice to listen to.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if we've yet come across a case where it's going to be like we can't use this, so
Mhm.
we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think fundamentally too, like we don't force authors to read their work. So I think a lot of
Oh
authors
yeah,
who
it's
do
optional.
choose to read their
Mhm.
work probably already have a natural sense of like, oh yeah, yeah, I know how I want to read this, and like,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
so that obviously helps too. Yeah.
Sure. Question, how is the audio accessed?
On any podcast platform,
Yes.
Okay.
Spotify,
Spotify,
Apple
Apple Music.
Music. Yeah.
Okay, so someone can just go to Spotify and go to find Toronto Journal there.
Yes. Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Can they access it through your site as well?
Yeah, it's on the
Yes.
site as well.
Mhm.
Mhm. Mhm. So do you work with writers on revision if a work comes in that's close but not fully there?
We have, yes.
Yeah, so I guess there's two examples of this. One is sometimes we get pieces that are very, very rough in terms of like grammar, things like that, but the story itself is very strong.
Mhm.
Hmm.
So we've had two or three cases of those where we just go through and there's many, many small changes.
Yeah.
And yeah,
But
so we do that.
yeah.
Mhm. But
Mhm.
then there was one case
Yeah, yeah.
that,
So then the flip side of that is when you have a really polished story where you're like, wow, this story is so good, but it's almost like, but there's just like the last paragraph, there's just something there that's not quite right. And in which
yeah,
case we wouldn't change that, but we would say to the author something like, you know, this story was really great, but we just feel like there's just something right at the end there that maybe like would you consider like revisiting that or like just looking at it again?
Hmm.
And then at that point, in the particular case that I'm talking about, we ended up publishing that in the subsequent issue.
Mhm.
So the author kind
with
of
a
took
revised
it
ending.
and
Yeah.
like he looked at it a little bit more and then revised it, but it was just like, so those are probably the two cases that have come up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what are common reasons for rejection?
So
Uh,
yeah. So one of the main reasons is just like there's so much coming in versus what we actually publish. I
Hmm.
mean, Like
Yeah,
there's
we
plenty of
have to,
stories.
yeah.
Yeah. This is why we also do we send different types of rejection letters depending on at what stage it was rejected.
Mhm.
Um, so that's a big reason. It's just there's not enough. We can only publish so many stories,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah,
there's just
I,
not so good stories.
I mean, yeah, I think the idea, even like it's not even like like I think to go back to one of the points we talked about earlier is that like subject matter is not really a grounds for any sort of disqualification, but like if you're taking a story and like there's someone can take even a commonplace situation and really flip it around so that like we see it in a new light versus somebody who isn't able to do that, right? Like where it's like maybe the two stories in terms of like the gloss you would write for both of them is the same, but the way the actual material is handled is just this one just is so much like really elevates it over the other one. Like sometimes it's just it comes down to something like that. Like this one was just really original, or this made me look at things in a new way, whereas the other one was well written, but it just didn't do that for me or for you. I think is what it comes down to with a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And would you encourage writers, if they are rejected, to keep trying?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, as far as what we've already mentioned, like with stories like how many stories we have to just pass on because we just don't have space. So,
Hmm.
like, we don't by any means consider ourselves like the final like arbiters of taste or anything like that. Like, we know that at a certain point, it's like a deeply personal thing,
Yeah,
right?
at a certain point, like each journal, there's so much subjectivity on like what the editors like or don't like. So
Yeah, like
yeah.
so like we know that that's the case for us, so we know it must be the case for other journals too. So like, sometimes it's like this is a great story and it just didn't make the final hurdle for us, but it's in no way like a condemnation of the story. It's just like, at a certain point our personal tastes just took over and elevated one story over the other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense. And is there any kind of communication or like network among the Canadian lit mags, not just in Toronto, but I know like Fiddlehead, Malahat Review, and Room, those are the top ones that come to mind. I mean, they've just been around for so long. Is there any kind of like here we have AWP, which is like the big yearly conference where MFA programs and literary magazine editors and writers come together. Is there any kind of like larger Canadian support for lit mags or network of lit mags?
Actually, there's something that was just recently established. I think it's called LMCC or
Hmm.
LMMC, something like that. It was just established maybe a year or two ago.
Mhm.
And it seems like they have like regular meetings to discuss the industry. And we haven't registered yet for that. That's on our to-do list.
Mhm. And is it like a conference or just a kind of like we also have it sounds like CLMP, which is the Council of Literary Magazines and Presses that we have here.
Oh, okay. I don't think they have conferences
Mhm.
yet. They might have something later, but they did have meetings amongst the editors, like regular meetings.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Were you gonna say something?
No. Yeah.
So is there a way for people to get involved if they're liking this, they're liking the energy and the enthusiasm and they want to volunteer with your magazine? Is that something you're open to? And how should people go about doing that?
Yeah, so I think we want to start like a program for volunteers for this next issue because a lot of people have reached out uh, expressing interest.
Mhm.
So yeah, I guess we'll prepare some like a page for the website about how it might work and share it on social media.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, this is great. I mean, I think we've covered the gist of the magazine. I want to thank you both for being here. And I have one final question. This is something that I ask all editors, but I don't even know that I need to ask it to you. But what keeps you motivated? What keeps you inspired? It sounds like you're both pretty inspired as is. But I always like to know because we know it's largely volunteer work. It's some editors are paying out of pocket, and we know you have other, family obligations, teaching, your own writing. So what keeps you kind of wanting to do this work?
Yeah, I think yeah.
No, you can say, I was gonna say just that like we love reading, we always have, the both of us, and like I think when you're reading a new story, especially like by a new author or any author really,
Yeah.
I just feel like it it's just added another level of connection with us, like to reading and to the writing process, and like being directly in touch with these
Yeah.
authors and hearing these
Mhm.
perspectives is just such an interesting thing for us.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
just reading something that's so like original is so exciting.
Mhm.
Or for this issue, we accepted a story that we thought was so good. And we thought for sure because our submissions are anonymous, so we thought for sure this must be a
Cool.
seasoned writer. And once she responded, it turned out she was still an undergrad and this was her first story. But it was incredible.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. And it's just so exciting to discover
Yeah.
the stories.
Yeah.
That's great.
And moments
Actually,
like, yeah.
just a quick follow-up. I didn't realize submissions are anonymous. Can you explain your decision there? So you want no identifying information, nothing in the cover letter?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, basically we don't want no cover letter,
Hmm.
nothing, no identifying information. The reason being because we don't want to be biased by. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, no, go
Well,
ahead.
we don't
Yeah.
want to be biased if you have like an impressive resume, or similarly if you've never been published. Like we just want to read the story itself, and it should stand alone,
Yeah,
separate from the author.
exactly. Yeah. We don't want to come to the stories with any preconceived notions based
Hmm.
on your credentials as an author. We just want the story to,
Yeah.
exactly, speak for itself. So,
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
great. That's great. Well, congratulations on your relatively new magazine, and you'll probably be flooded with submissions now. So hope it keeps you busy for a while. And thank you both so much. And comment here, go Blue Jays.
Yeah, appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you.